Welcome to The Inheritance Game by Amjad. This story is full of mystery, secrets, family drama, and a shocking twist you won't forget. And guess what? This entire story is told in very simple English. So here's a challenge for you. If you understand this whole audiobook, it means your English is already 50% better than most learners. Yes, you heard that right. If you can follow this story from start to end, your English is not basic anymore. You're moving toward confident speaking and listening. So relax, listen carefully, and imagine the story like a movie in your head. Let's begin the story. There was a woman named Margaret Thorne. She was rich, very rich. She owned lands, businesses, and even a private island. But now, she was dying. On her hospital bed, surrounded by nurses and lawyers, she made one last strange wish. She said, "I will give all my money to one of my daughters, the one who can show me the happiest marriage. But it must be real. They must live like this for 6 months." Everyone was shocked. Margaret had 3 daughters. Victoria, the oldest, strong, proud, a little cold. Eleanor, the middle one, smart, quiet, and always hiding secrets. Claire, the youngest, sweet, kind, but never taken seriously. They were all married, but none of them had a perfect marriage. So now they had to pretend. For 6 months, they had to act like they were deeply in love. But what they didn't know was this: their husbands had also been given the same challenge. In secret, they too were told, "Act like your marriage is perfect. If you do, you might get the money." Now, inside each home, the game began. Fake smiles, forced love, secret plans. The race for inheritance had started. But one of them, Claire, she felt something was wrong. Something big was being hidden. And she was right, because this game was not about love. It was about something much darker. Claire was not like her sisters. She did not care much about money. She just wanted peace. But now, everything had changed. Her husband, Adam, started acting very strange. He was suddenly romantic, kind, and helpful, like he had become a new person. At first, Claire was happy. She thought, maybe he wants to fix their marriage. But soon, she began to notice small things. He was too perfect. He smiled too much. He always agreed with her. He never did that before. One evening, Claire walked into the kitchen and saw Adam talking on the phone. When he noticed her, he quickly cut the call and smiled. But Claire had heard one sentence. He had said, "Yes, I'm playing my part." She has no idea. Claire felt cold. She pretended to smile and walked away. She now knew the truth. Adam was faking. But why? Was it just for the inheritance? Later that night, Claire sat alone in her room. She thought about her sisters. Victoria and her husband, James, always fought before. But now they were posting happy pictures online. Eleanor and her husband, Daniel, were living in different cities for work. But now suddenly, Daniel had moved back and was cooking breakfast every day. It all felt too fake. Claire decided to visit her mother, Margaret, the next day. Margaret was weak but still sharp. Claire looked into her eyes and asked, "Why did you make this rule? Why this game?" Margaret only smiled and said, "You'll understand later. Sometimes, truth comes out only when people wear masks." Claire left with more questions. At home, she began to write everything in a notebook. She wrote down all the strange things Adam was doing. She also started watching her sister's behavior more closely. Victoria looked happy, but her hands were always shaking. Eleanor looked calm, but her eyes were red like she had been crying. This was not love. This was not marriage. This was acting. Claire also noticed something else. Her mother's lawyer, Mr. Dean, kept visiting each daughter. He never stayed long, but he always left a white envelope behind. One day, Claire opened the envelope after Adam brought it in. Inside was a letter. It said, "You have completed 1 month. Keep showing your love. Keep playing the role. 6 months will pass quickly." Claire understood now. It was a real game, a real test. Someone was watching them. Someone was checking if they were really pretending or not. One night, Claire asked Adam directly, "Are you doing all this for the money?" Adam looked at her and said, "Are you?" They both stayed quiet. Now the game had changed. It was not about acting happy anymore. It was about who could trust whom. Claire realized that even though they lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, and smiled at each other every day, they were strangers. And yet, deep inside, something else was happening. Claire was starting to feel again. She was remembering the days when Adam used to make her laugh for real. The way he held her hand when she was scared. The way they used to talk all night. But was it real now, or just a trick? And if it was fake, then why was her heart beating faster again? The 6-month game was not only testing their marriage. It was testing their minds, their hearts, and their truth. And Claire was slowly starting to see. This game had more than one secret. Claire began to observe everything around her more closely. Every smile, every word, every action. It all started to feel like part of a big show. She could no longer tell what was real and what was not. She felt like a stranger in her own home. Adam was still playing the role of a perfect husband, and he was doing it very well. He made breakfast for her, brought flowers, and even told her she was beautiful. But none of it felt real to her anymore. It was like watching a movie. Everything looked perfect, but something was missing, the feeling. She remembered the early days of her marriage. Back then, Adam did not bring flowers, but he listened. He laughed at her jokes. He shared silly stories about work. And when she was sad, he just sat with her without saying anything. That Adam felt real. This Adam felt like a character in a play. One evening, Claire sat in the garden alone. It was quiet. She looked up at the stars and felt lost. Just then, Eleanor arrived. They hadn't spoken much in the past few weeks. Eleanor sat beside her and said, "Do you ever wonder if this is worth it?" Claire looked at her and asked, "Do you mean the money?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "Yes. All of this. The pretending. The pressure. I don't sleep well anymore. I feel like I'm lying every day." Claire wanted to say more, but she stopped. She realized that Eleanor was scared too. Maybe they were all scared. Then Eleanor whispered, "I don't think this is about money. I think Mother is hiding something." Claire looked at her with surprise. Eleanor continued, "Last week, I went to her room without telling anyone. I found her looking at old photos. But they weren't our family photos. They were pictures of women I didn't recognize." She quickly closed the box when she saw me. Claire remembered something too. When she was young, she once found a small trunk in her mother's closet. It had baby clothes inside, but not for just 3 babies. There were more. At the time, she thought maybe they were gifts or donations. Now she wasn't so sure. They both sat in silence. Something deep was buried in their family's past. Meanwhile, Victoria was facing her own battle. Her husband, James, was growing impatient. He hated pretending. He told Victoria that he wanted to leave after the game was over. Victoria begged him to wait. She told him this was their only chance to finally get something from her mother. But James didn't care. He said he was tired of lies and wanted freedom. Victoria started losing control. She became harsh with the servants, cold with her sisters, and angry with herself. She drank wine every night and stared at the mirror for hours. She wanted to win, but she didn't know how much more she could take. Back at Claire's home, Adam found the notebook Claire was hiding. It had everything she had written: dates, notes, feelings, questions. He didn't say anything to her, but she noticed a change in him. He was quieter. He avoided eye contact. Then one night, he said, "You don't trust me." Claire replied, "Should I?" He didn't answer. The air between them became heavy. They were both pretending, but they were also both hurting. Deep inside, there was something else growing: doubt, fear, and maybe even guilt. One day, Mr. Dean came again. This time, Claire met him alone. She asked him directly, "Why is my mother doing this?" Mr. Dean looked nervous. He said, "Your mother believes that truth is found under pressure. She says that love cannot be proven with words. It must be tested." Claire asked, "Tested for what?" Mr. Dean didn't answer clearly. He said, "Just keep going. You'll know soon enough." Claire returned to her room. Her mind was full of questions. What truth was her mother looking for? Why now, when she was so close to death? And most of all, what did this game have to do with love? That night, Claire had a strange dream. She saw herself standing in a long hallway. At the end of the hallway was a baby's cry. She walked toward the sound, but the hallway kept growing longer. When she finally reached the end, she opened the door and saw a crib. Inside the crib there was no baby, only a note. It said, "Find where you began. Only then will you know where to end." She woke up with her heart beating fast. And suddenly, she remembered something. A letter. A letter her mother once wrote to someone named Isabel. She had found it by accident many years ago inside an old book. The letter said, "She will never know unless the truth comes to her on its own." Claire had always thought it was just a letter to a friend, but now it felt like something else. Maybe the game wasn't just about marriage. Maybe the real truth was about the daughters themselves. In the days that followed, Claire couldn't stop thinking about the name Isabel. Who was she? Why had her mother written a letter to her that said, "She will never know unless the truth comes to her on its own"? Claire began to feel that her whole life might be built on something that wasn't true. Something was missing from their past, and her mother had carefully hidden it. One morning, Claire went to the family's storage room. It was filled with old boxes, dusty trunks, broken furniture, and forgotten memories. She searched for hours, opening every box, going through every folder, checking photo albums, and reading old letters. Finally, she found something unusual. It was a file marked "Private." Inside were documents, hospital records, letters, and adoption papers. Claire's hands shook as she read them. The papers were not about her. They were about a woman named Isabel Grant. The adoption forms showed that Isabel had given birth to a child and that the child had been taken in by someone else. The papers were old, more than 30 years old. But the strange part was that the name of the woman who adopted the child was Margaret Hawthorne, Claire's mother. Claire felt her chest grow tight. She kept reading. The file had more than one set of documents. There were 3. And all 3 showed different mothers, but the same woman as the one who adopted the children, Margaret. Claire sat down slowly. Her mind was racing. She understood now. She and her sisters were not Margaret's biological daughters. They were adopted. All 3 of them. And none of them had known. Why had her mother hidden this? Why had she never said anything? Claire thought about Eleanor and Victoria. Should she tell them? Would they even believe her? She carefully put the papers back in the file and hid them under her bed. She wasn't ready to share the truth yet. She needed more answers. Later that day, she went to visit her mother again. Margaret was lying on her bed, looking tired but calm. Claire sat beside her and asked quietly, "Was Isabel my mother?" Margaret didn't react at first. Then, very slowly, she smiled. "You found the file," she said. Claire nodded. Margaret looked at her and said, "You were always the curious one. I knew you would find it first." Claire asked, "Why didn't you tell us?" Why the lies? Margaret sighed. Because you were mine the moment I held you. I didn't think you needed to know. But then things changed. I started to feel guilty. I wanted to know if love was real. If you would still be loyal if there was nothing to gain. Claire frowned. You mean, that's why you created this game? Margaret didn't answer directly. She just said, love is not given. It is proven. Claire left the room feeling more confused than before. Was her mother testing their marriages or testing them as daughters? Was the inheritance about money or something deeper? At the same time, Eleanor was going through her own storm. Her husband, Daniel, had stopped playing the perfect husband. One evening, he told her he was tired of the pretending, tired of being watched, tired of smiling when he didn't feel like it. Eleanor broke down. She screamed at him. She cried. And then she told him the truth, that she had always known their marriage wasn't perfect, that she was playing along because she had no choice. She said, "We don't even love each other. We just live together like roommates. This game just made it worse." Daniel looked at her and said, "Then let's stop." Eleanor nodded. They decided to stop pretending in private. But in public, they would keep the show going. Because even though they didn't want the money, they didn't want to lose either. Victoria, on the other hand, was losing control quickly. She had found a bottle of sleeping pills in the bathroom and had started using them to stay calm. Her husband, James, had moved into another room, saying he couldn't take the pressure anymore. Victoria didn't care. She had decided that she would win alone if she had to. She practiced fake smiles in the mirror. She wrote down stories to tell at family dinners. She watched videos on how to sound loving when you're angry. One night, she sat in her room and whispered to herself, "It doesn't matter if it's real. I just need to survive 6 months. After that, I'll take the money and leave." But the truth was, she was breaking inside. She was scared that she was losing her mind. All 3 sisters were now struggling in their own ways. Claire had found the truth about their birth. Eleanor had accepted that her marriage was fake. Victoria had become a prisoner in her own game. And then something unexpected happened. One day, Claire received a letter. It was not from Mr. Dean. It had no name on it. Just her name, written in clean, careful handwriting. Inside was one sentence. "The real inheritance is not money. It is life itself." Claire read it over and over again. She didn't know who sent it, but she had a feeling. This game was about more than love, more than marriage, more than truth. Something even bigger was waiting to be discovered. Claire sat in her room, staring at the letter that had only one line written on it. "The real inheritance is not money. It is life itself." The words repeated in her mind again and again. It didn't make sense to her at first. But then she remembered the rules of the will. The daughters had to fake a happy marriage for 6 months. And now she began to ask a new question. Why 6 months? Why this exact condition? What was really happening here? The more she thought about it, the more she realized her mother had planned everything with care. Nothing was random, not even the length of the game. 6 months was not just a test of love, it was time. Time for something to happen. Claire's mind suddenly stopped. She remembered something. A sentence from the old adoption files. There had been a note about fertility evaluation, and another one marked adoption confirmed after birth. That made her think, what if the game was about birth, not marriage? She began to feel sick. She sat down and tried to think clearly. What if the inheritance would not go to the daughters at all? What if it would go to a child? Claire started looking through the private file again. She found a small notebook that had been tucked between the pages. It had old handwriting in it. It looked like a diary. Maybe her mother's. The entries were few, and some words were hard to read, but one line stood out. None of them are truly mine, but maybe their children will be. Claire dropped the notebook. It was becoming clearer now. Her mother was not really their birth mother. She had taken them, maybe not illegally, but secretly. She had raised them like her own. But deep inside, maybe she always knew that something was missing. And now she had created this strange game not to pass down her money, but to pass down her legacy. Claire whispered to herself, the child, the first child. That's who will get everything. Meanwhile, Victoria was falling apart. Her obsession with winning had pushed her into deep loneliness. James had left the house. He said he was going to his brother's place for a few days, but Victoria knew the truth. He was escaping her. She had become too much, too controlled, too cold, too scared. But Victoria didn't care anymore. She had stopped trying to be real. She only focused on playing the role of a perfect wife whenever others were watching. She smiled when guests came over. She shared cute stories during family dinners. But behind closed doors, she cried herself to sleep. One night, she took out her wedding photo, stared at it for a long time, and then tore it in half. She said to herself, love is not real. It's just a game. And I'm going to win it. Eleanor, on the other hand, had found a strange kind of peace. Since the day she and Daniel decided to stop pretending in private, things had become easier. They no longer fought. They respected each other's space. And in a strange way, they were becoming better friends. One evening, Daniel made her tea and said, we don't have to love each other to be kind. Eleanor smiled. Maybe this is what love is. Not fire, not passion, but peace. Daniel looked at her. Or maybe we've just stopped lying. They both laughed. Eleanor didn't know if they were growing apart or closer. But she felt less angry, less tired. She still didn't understand why her mother had put them in this strange situation, but she had stopped worrying about the inheritance. It felt like the money didn't matter anymore. But the one who could not stop thinking about the game was Claire. She had now begun writing everything down. She made a list of events, a timeline, a map of secrets. She even drew a small family tree. And in the center of the page, she wrote one word in large letters: child. Claire had a strong feeling. Her mother was waiting for one of them to have a baby. That's why the game was 6 months long. That's why love was being tested. Because love could lead to a new life. A child. A grandchild. And maybe that grandchild was the real key to the inheritance. The words from the letter came back to her. The real inheritance is not money. It is life itself. Then came the biggest question. Who would become pregnant first? Would it be her, Eleanor, Victoria, or had it already happened? Claire knew she had to find out. She couldn't let this mystery destroy them. Because now this wasn't just a game. It was a race. And the prize was not just money. It was legacy, power, truth, and perhaps love that was not fake. Claire could not sleep that night. Her mind was full of thoughts. She had read the diary. She had seen the clues. She now believed the real inheritance would go to the first grandchild. But she had no proof. All she had were guesses and feelings. Still, she was sure something strange was going on. She decided to find more answers. The next morning, Claire went to the family lawyer's office. She said she needed to see the full will. The lawyer looked at her with surprise. "You already know the rules," he said. "Pretend to be happily married for 6 months. That's all." Claire smiled. "Yes, I know. But I want to read the full document. The original one." The lawyer hesitated but then gave in. "Fine. Come with me." He brought out an old brown file. Inside was the full will. Many pages, most of them written in legal language. Claire read slowly. Most of it was about the house, the land, and money. Then, near the end, she found a strange paragraph. It said, "In the event of unexpected circumstances, or if all 3 fail to fulfill the terms, the inheritance shall pass to the next of blood." Next of blood. Those words stayed in her mind. Claire pointed to the line. "What does this mean?" The lawyer replied, "It's just a backup plan. If none of you complete the challenge, then the money goes to the next blood relative." Claire thought deeply. And who would that be? The lawyer shrugged. "It depends. Maybe one of your children, if any of you have one by then." Claire nodded slowly. Now she had confirmation. The child was not just a guess. It was part of the plan. The real plan. Meanwhile, in a different part of the city, Eleanor was sitting in her garden, watching the sky. Daniel was beside her, reading a book. For the first time in many weeks, things felt normal. There was no shouting, no acting, no pretending. Just quiet. Eleanor looked at Daniel and said, You know, we're not that bad. Daniel smiled. We're just two people stuck in something strange. But we've learned how to breathe. They sat there for hours. Eleanor didn't know what their future would be. But she knew one thing. Pretending was easier when the other person understood you. But not everyone was at peace. Victoria had started spying on Claire and Eleanor. She had hired a private investigator. She wanted to know if either of them was cheating or hiding something. Victoria believed this was war. And she would not lose. The investigator told her about Claire's visit to the lawyer. That made Victoria panic. Why was Claire digging into the will? What had she found? Victoria called James. He didn't pick up. She called again. No answer. She texted him, begging him to talk. Finally, he sent one message. We need space. Please stop pushing. Victoria felt like everything was falling apart. Her marriage, her mind, her chances. She started drinking at night just to sleep. But sleep didn't come easy anymore. One night, she had a dream. In the dream, she was in a courtroom. Her mother was the judge. Her sisters sat on one side, smiling. She stood alone on the other side. The judge looked at her and said, "You lied too well. You forgot who you really are." She woke up sweating. The next morning, she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. Elsewhere, Claire continued her search. She now wanted to learn about her own past. She visited the hospital where she was born. The records were old. Some were missing. But she found one important piece. Her birth certificate had a different name at first. Then it was changed. There was no father's name. The mother's name was written, but it was not the name of the woman who raised her. Claire's hands shook. She checked again. No mistake. Her mother had changed her name. Claire whispered, "She's not my real mother." Now it all made sense. The diary. The words, "None of them are truly mine." The secrecy. The obsession with a grandchild. Claire was not just playing a game. She was part of a bigger plan. A plan made long ago, based on lies. That night, she called Eleanor and asked to meet. When they met at a quiet cafe, Claire told her everything. About the diary. About the Real will. About their adoption. Eleanor was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I had dreams like this. I used to feel like I didn't belong. But I thought it was just in my head." Claire nodded. "I felt the same." Eleanor asked, "Do you think Victoria knows?" Claire said, "Not yet, but she will soon." Both of them looked at each other. In that moment, they were no longer rivals. They were sisters in truth, not in blood. And they both understood one thing. Their lives were not what they thought. They were not daughters. They were heirs to a secret. And that secret was about to explode. Victoria sat alone in her room, surrounded by silence. She had not spoken to James in 3 days. Her phone buzzed often, but none of the messages were from him. Her mind felt heavy, full of fear and anger. She was sure Claire was planning something. She had seen the signs. Claire's quiet nature had changed. She was no longer playing to win. She was searching for truth. And that scared Victoria more than anything. She poured herself a drink and sat down with her laptop. She opened her private investigator's latest report. It was full of pictures and notes. One photo showed Claire entering the hospital's records room. Another showed her meeting Eleanor at a cafe. There were no clear answers in the report, but Victoria could feel it. Something was happening behind her back. She closed the laptop and looked around. The house felt colder than usual. The paintings on the wall, the polished wooden floors, the quiet ticking of the old clock. All of it reminded her of her mother, a woman who had never truly shown love, only control. Victoria had spent her whole life trying to earn her approval, and now she was losing everything, even her marriage. Across town, Eleanor and Claire met again. This time, they went to the library to study more public records. Claire had an idea: to check the background of all 3 daughters. She believed all of them might have similar stories. Eleanor agreed. Together, they found something shocking. All 3 birth certificates had signs of changes. Different hospitals. Different dates of record updates. And the biggest shock, there were no official adoption papers for any of them. Claire said softly, "She took us. All of us." Eleanor leaned back. She built her family like a puzzle made of stolen pieces. They sat in silence. The truth felt heavy. Their mother, the one who raised them, was not just secretive. She had done something criminal, something dark. Claire then remembered a story their mother used to tell. A story about how she had always wanted to be a mother, but couldn't have children. Back then, it had seemed like a simple, sad story. Now it sounded like a clue. Eleanor said, "Why didn't she just adopt us legally?" Claire answered, "Because she wanted to control the story. If she adopted us legally, there would be records. She didn't want that." Eleanor nodded. That's why the game is about pretending. That's why she used love as a weapon. Later that day, Claire visited the old family house, the one they had grown up in. It was now empty, waiting for its new owner, depending on who would win the challenge. Claire walked through the rooms, remembering childhood moments. But now those memories felt fake, like someone else's life. She entered the attic. It was dusty, filled with boxes. She opened one. Inside were photo albums, letters, and an old tape recorder. She pressed play on the recorder. A soft, shaky voice filled the room. It was her mother's voice. "I did what I had to do. The world wouldn't give me children. So I took them. I gave them a better life. I gave them rules, order, purpose. and now they must prove they understand the meaning of family. If they want my fortune, they must show me they can build what I never had. Claire sat down on the floor, the recorder still playing. Tears came to her eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of everything she had just confirmed. Her mother had always believed love had to be earned through performance. It was never freely given. The challenge was never just about marriage. It was about proving worth to a woman who had stolen her own family. At the same time, Eleanor spoke to her husband, Daniel. She told him everything. At first, he didn't believe her. But then she showed him the birth certificate, the records, the letters. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You're brave, Eleanor. You've been through so much." Eleanor looked at him. "You stayed through this game, even when you didn't have to." "Why?" Daniel smiled a little. "Because I saw the real you behind all the pretending." They held hands. For the first time, Eleanor didn't feel like she was pretending. She felt like herself. Victoria, however, was falling deeper into paranoia. She started checking every message, every call. She watched her own husband's movements closely. She was convinced that James had turned against her. When he finally returned to the house one evening, she yelled at him without even listening. James stood still and said, "I don't want this life, Victoria. I never wanted to be part of your mother's sick game." Victoria shouted, "This is my family, my future. Why don't you care?" James said, "Because I care about truth. And this family is built on lies." He packed his bag and walked out. Victoria was alone. As the 6th month moved closer, all 3 sisters had made choices. Eleanor had found peace. Claire had found truth. And Victoria had lost everything. But the game was still on. The real inheritance still waited. And now, something unexpected was about to happen. Something that would change the path for all of them. The final month of the challenge had begun. The clock was ticking. One more month, and the matriarch's will would be executed. The sisters had no idea who was winning or what the final decision would be. All they knew was this: something big was coming, something they could feel in the air. Claire spent more time with Eleanor. The two had become close, not just as sisters but as partners in truth. They were no longer playing to win the inheritance. They were trying to understand the full story. The deeper they dug, the more they uncovered. They found medical reports, private letters, and audio recordings in hidden files. And slowly they started to build the true picture of their so-called mother. Years ago, the matriarch had been declared infertile. Medical papers showed her visits to many fertility clinics. She had tried everything: treatments, therapies, even experimental methods. Nothing worked. The pain of not having a child broke something inside her. But instead of accepting it, she created her own way. One of the letters was written to an old friend. It said, "I have found a solution. If I cannot grow a family, I will build one." They will be mine, and no one will take them from me. Not even the truth. Claire looked at Eleanor. She didn't just take us. She believed we were hers. Like objects she could collect. Eleanor said, "That's why she made this challenge. She didn't want love. She wanted control till the end." Meanwhile, Victoria was getting worse. Her health was showing signs of stress. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat properly. She lived on energy drinks and pills. Her husband James was gone, and now she had no one to pretend with. The pressure made her angry and afraid. She called lawyers, trying to change her legal position. She even tried to hire someone to find out if Claire or Eleanor were planning anything against her. But her efforts only pushed people further away. Back in Claire's apartment, she got a surprise. A message from an unknown number. It had only one line: "You're close to the answer. Come to the address below." Claire was careful. She didn't reply at first. But after thinking for a while, she decided to go. She told Eleanor where she was going, just in case. The address led her to a small building in a quiet part of town. Inside, she met an old nurse who used to work in the hospital years ago. The woman said she had been carrying a secret for too long. Now that the matriarch was gone, she wanted to share it. The nurse said, "You weren't just adopted. You were taken. All three of you. It was planned. The woman who raised you had money and power. She paid people to keep quiet. I was young back then. I needed the money. I regret it now." Claire asked, "Do you know who my real mother is?" The nurse nodded slowly. "No one knows exactly. The records were destroyed. But one baby girl came from a teenage mother who disappeared after giving birth. Another was from a family in trouble, forced to give the child away. And one was reported missing. The case was never solved." Claire felt her knees weaken. "Which one was I?" The nurse said, "I think you were the missing child." Claire left with her mind full of questions. She wanted to cry, scream, run, but she walked slowly, thinking about what to do next. She now understood. This was not just a game. This was a life that had been stolen from her. At the same time, Eleanor had a quiet moment with her husband Daniel. She told him she was done with the challenge. She didn't want the inheritance. She just wanted peace. Daniel smiled and said, "Then we start our life. A real one." They packed their things and moved out of the family estate. Eleanor left a note on the old dining table. "I'm not playing anymore. Let the past stay behind. Let love be real from now on." Victoria, however, refused to stop. She walked into the lawyer's office with a list of demands. She shouted, cried, and made threats. But the lawyer looked at her calmly and said, "The decision is already made. The challenge is not what you think it is. You should talk to your sisters. You're about to lose more than money." Victoria stormed out. not understanding his words, but something about his tone made her nervous. That night, Claire and Eleanor sat together on the balcony of Eleanor's new apartment. They watched the city lights and thought about the future. They talked about their real mothers, the lives they might have had, and the pain they carried now. Claire said, "Do you think we'll ever feel normal again?" Eleanor replied, "I don't know, but at least now we're not pretending anymore." Suddenly, Claire felt her phone vibrate. It was a message from the family lawyer. Just 4 words. "Final meeting tomorrow morning." Claire looked at Eleanor. "It's time." The next morning arrived with a strange silence. The family lawyer had called all 3 sisters to the estate for the final reading of the will. The sun was out, but the air felt heavy, as if something important, something irreversible was about to happen. Claire and Eleanor arrived together. They walked through the same gate they had entered many times before. This time, though, they felt different. They weren't there to fight or to play. They had found some truths. They had faced their fears. And now, they were ready to hear the rest. Victoria arrived last. Her eyes looked tired. Her movements were slow. She had been trying to stay in control for so long that her energy was now running low. She sat across from her sisters in the study room, where the old family lawyer was waiting with a set of papers and a closed file in front of him. He cleared his throat and said, "Today is not just about money. It is about truth. And truth, as you have learned, is often heavier than gold." Victoria looked confused. Claire remained calm. Eleanor folded her hands in her lap, ready for whatever came next. The lawyer opened the file and pulled out an envelope. "This letter was written by your mother 1 week before her death. It contains instructions and a final message for all of you. I will now read it aloud." He began reading. "My dear girls, if you are listening to this, then I am gone. And perhaps you hate me now. That is okay. I never expected to be loved. I only wanted to be remembered. This challenge I gave you was never about showing love. It was about revealing what was hidden behind it. I wanted to see what you would do when everything was at risk. Would you lie, fight, break, or would you understand the truth? You were never mine by blood. I took you because I needed to feel like a mother, and I believed I could give you a better life. But now I see I was wrong to keep you from your real past. So here it is. The true inheritance does not go to any of you. It goes to the child who is born from this game. The one child who will be raised in truth, not lies. That child will receive everything, the estate, the money, the properties. The rest of you will only receive one thing, the truth." There was a long silence after the letter was read. Victoria stood up in shock. "What? A child? What child?" The lawyer opened another file. "There is something else. A medical report. It was delivered to me yesterday. One of you is pregnant. The blood test confirms it. Claire's heart skipped a beat. Eleanor stared at Claire. "Is it you?" Claire slowly nodded. Victoria shouted, "This is madness. She planned all this? For a baby?" The lawyer replied, "Yes, she wanted a legacy that was real. Not built on lies, but born through all this pain. That was her final game." Victoria sank back into the chair, speechless, her eyes filled with tears. Not of sadness, but of defeat. Everything she had tried to control had slipped through her fingers. Claire sat still, her hands on her stomach. She had not told anyone yet, not even Eleanor. She had found out just 2 days ago but didn't know how to share the news. Now the whole room knew. Eleanor reached out and held Claire's hand. "It's okay. This changes everything, but it also makes sense now." The lawyer stood up. "From this moment on, the estate will be held in trust. It will be released to the child once they turn 21. Until then, Claire will manage it on the child's behalf. That is the legal setup your mother arranged. The rest of you will receive no share, unless Claire chooses otherwise." Victoria didn't respond. She stared at the floor. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. After the meeting, Claire walked through the garden. The same garden where her fake marriage had been tested, where lies had been spoken, where secrets had begun to unfold. Now, she walked with a new truth. She was going to be a mother. She didn't want the money. She didn't care about the estate. But she knew one thing: her child would grow up with love. Real love. Not games. Not challenges. Not tricks. Eleanor walked beside her. "You're going to be a great mother," she said. Claire smiled gently. "Only if I remember everything she wasn't." Together, they walked back into the house, leaving behind the rules of a dead woman and stepping into a new life. One built not on inheritance, but on healing. The weeks that followed the reading of the will were filled with changes. Claire spent her days adjusting to the new reality of becoming a mother. She was still processing everything she had learned about her past, but now she had a new purpose: her child. It wasn't about wealth or inheritance anymore. It was about giving her child something she had never had: a sense of belonging. Eleanor stayed close to her, offering support and comfort. She helped Claire organize her life, sorting through the old family documents and slowly releasing the grip of the past. They both agreed that the money, the property, the challenge, it no longer mattered. It was the truth that needed to be understood and the future that needed to be built. As Claire's pregnancy progressed, she began to see her own life in a new light. She had been so focused on the idea of family as something to control, to manipulate, but now she saw that true family was about love and trust. It wasn't about pretending to be something you were not. It was about accepting who you are and who you want to become. Victoria, on the other hand, was a broken woman. She had fought so hard to win the game, to take control, but in the end, It was her own lies that had led to her downfall. She couldn't accept the truth about her past, and it consumed her. She tried to reach out to Claire, to apologize, but Claire refused to engage with her. There was nothing left to say. The damage had been done. Claire had forgiven herself for the choices she made in the past, but she couldn't forgive Victoria. Victoria had always been driven by greed and the desire for power, while Claire was learning to move forward with honesty and love. The family she had once known was now a shadow of what it used to be. The ties that had bound them together had been severed. Eleanor continued to live her life without the burden of the challenge. She had left the family estate, moving into a quiet apartment with Daniel, her husband. Together they built a simple life, one that was grounded in reality, not the fantasy they had been forced to live. Eleanor was no longer chasing after a prize that wasn't meant for her. She had found peace in the truth, just as Claire had. The child that Claire carried was a symbol of that truth. The baby was not born out of manipulation or trickery, but out of love. Claire knew that the child would never be a part of the twisted game their grandmother had set in motion. The child would be different. They would grow up with the understanding that family is about real connections, not deceit or competition. The final meeting with the family lawyer was quiet. There were no arguments, no protests. Claire took her place in the family's legal documents as the child's guardian, but she knew that the inheritance wasn't hers to take. It was a legacy that belonged to her child, not to her. The lawyer handed her the legal papers, and for the first time in a long while, Claire felt at peace. The weight that had once felt so heavy on her shoulders was finally gone. As the months passed, Claire began to think about her future. She wanted to raise her child in a world where honesty mattered more than anything else. She would teach her child the importance of love, kindness, and respect, things she had never learned from the matriarch. She would show them that family wasn't just about bloodlines. It was about how you treat one another, how you build each other up, and how you share your lives with the people who truly care. Eleanor and Claire spent many nights talking about what they would do next. They both knew that the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready for it. They had each other, and they had the strength to face whatever came their way. They had discovered that sometimes the hardest challenges lead to the greatest discoveries. For Claire, the greatest discovery was that she had a family, not the one she had been given by birth, but the one she had built with love and understanding. The inheritance was no longer important. What mattered was the family she was creating, a family that was bound by truth, not by a game. The final twist of the story wasn't about money. It wasn't about a grand estate or a hidden fortune. It was about breaking free from the past and starting something new, something real. Claire had won. Not by playing a game, but by choosing love over lies. And in the end, that was the greatest inheritance of all. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for the next adventure. Thanks for watching.